Namaste, Jay Bharat. It really makes sense to discuss about the human nature question. Or it also might make sense to ask the question, is there something called human nature at all? There must be something, and we all are inclined to think in terms that there must be something in general called as human nature. Right. Then, if you go back to the philosophies of people, uh, are there people who understood human nature at least to the closeness of the reality, at least the near spirit of it? Uh, Marx, of course, tried his best to understand human nature. He thought he is basing himself on human nature, but the Marxists don't agree with him. That's irony. For Marx, if you look at Marx, uh, it presumably or it appears that Marx believes that the human being is essentially good. That thing is there. On the other hand, if you look at Darwin, he would say the opposite. He doesn't say that, he has to say the opposite because he speaks about survival of the fittest. And how does one survive? The only method of surviving is being self-centeredness. I don't want to call it a selfishness, but at least self-centeredness. Otherwise, you won't survive. Uh, Simple as that. So anyway, Marx would say that man is essentially good, and he tries to bring his theories on the so-called essential goodness of man, and he completely fails because his premises go wrong. Not only that, his presumption that man is essentially good, his other premises of his theories go wrong. So he doesn't bring out a theory which is consistent and successful. Very fantasy based, so it makes it fantastic. But it's not real. It's far from reality. It's obvious and understood. Other than for some lotus eating dreamers, Chinesen, lotus eaters. So lotus eating dreamers would still believe that it's a kind of heaven. Maybe that's how people understand. Some at least understand. That's it. So. Some of us failed to understand human nature. Darwin must have not failed to understand human nature, but he was not studying about human nature in that sense of the term. He was talking about the biological kind of evolution, where he speaks of survival of the fittest, and that implies that if you want to survive, you have to be conscious about your survival, and if you have to be conscious about your survival, you have to be conscious about yourselves, and then you have to be conscious about yourself at the cost of someone else over the others. So the other automatically becomes excluded, and when it comes to Sartre much later, the other is a threat. All these things gets connected in a thinking pattern. But maybe Buddha in Bharat have understood human nature better than these people. He neither says you're good nor bad, nor those things doesn't come. But I say he looks at it in a transcendental perspective where these things don't function. He says your real nature is what you find here. Your real nature is your transcendental self. And that's quite possible. One can invent a philosophical level within each person and a transcendental existence of each individual where all these impurities can get vanished. So that's quite possible. Otherwise, a talk about human nature would take you nowhere. With all the examples in front of you. Then again, there are discussions about man as being his real self as being his soul, his real self as being this and that. Now, all these questions are there. But these thoughts can be significantly significant because we don't know what we are is a real thing. And we should look to understand what we are. Of course, the many thoughts in Bharatiya knowledge tradition speak. The highest knowledge is knowing you. The highest knowledge is realizing what you are. Then that's a different thing. The highest knowledge is realizing what you are. Then it's presupposed that your real nature is not what you think what you are. Your real nature is something else. They're going to spirituality, they're going to transcendence, they're going to transcendental level, saying that your soul is what you really are, and the soul belongs to a transcendental level, and that is there. That's there. But practically speaking, what we are doing today, how we live in society, uh, uh, one thing I feel like telling people is that uh, please do some kind of introspection from time to time. Please do some kind of introspection from time to time whenever you find yourselves free, and look within yourselves as what's happening in your mind. You can obtain frames of mind existing in your mind, multiple frames of mind. That though there are jumps from one frame to another frame, very often, and often disconnected from one to another, but there are frames in your mind which you can observe. Or you can only observe the frames at different places. You can't see the mind as itself in a total kind of there's not total perception possible, and there's not even a totality of mind possible to even understand, and it doesn't exist as you think. But there are multiple frames, like brick by brick you make wall. So these frames are possible, and look at these frames, and it is possible for you to look at each frame and find whether it is appropriate or not. Appropriate in the sense, you see how much of selfishness gets in it, self-centeredness, which manifests as selfishness. How much of such things get into it? You can look for, observe for it. So the human nature, when you try to understand yourselves, that will become your nature. Please see within yourselves for your nature, and please make corrections when you think it's not appropriate, and do make corrections. And if people can do it, we shall have a much better world. Why having negative thoughts about things, and why having assumed, imagined thoughts about other things and others in your mind? They may be real and they may not be real. Don't be very ambitious that you can understand everything. You can't understand other people, you can't understand phenomenal world, everything. You may, by and large, but then not totally. So there are possibilities of you making mistakes, I'm making mistakes, everyone making mistakes. And let's try to eliminate those mistakes by a simple method of introspection. Close your eyes. I'm not asking you to meditate. Close your eyes and do introspection. Something there of a meditation on a very mundane level. Meditation has to be transcendental. Something has to be on mundane level. Correct yourselves possibly. Comfort shall be yours. That makes no difference to many others, but then makes a lot of difference to you. Please think and please see. We'll meet again. Till then, Namaste. Jai Bharat. Jai Shri Ram.